And I say, whoa, how did it end up like this? It's a total mystery, a swing in the mist. Yeah, I'm standing in the wreckage of a life becoming, and I swear to you, I never even saw it coming.
All right, welcome back to the Prima Law Podcast. Today we have a great episode for you. First, we're going to talk about one of these viral videos involving a foreign congressional representative, from outside the U.S., and a situation with her son who's requesting asylum. It's entertaining. It's sad. It's also a bit of reality there. We do a little bit of a reality check for them. The next section is going to be on the United States Supreme Court decision striking down tariffs and how that might relate in the immigration context as well. And lastly, can you believe it? There's a new proposed rule, officially dated for tomorrow, but they released it today, on work permits for those seeking asylum and how it's going to get just awful. So we got a lot of good news, a lot of bad news, a lot of opportunity to laugh, cry, and everything in between. Thanks for joining us today.
As always, we're brought to you by Prima Law. Prima Law is immigration case management. Okay, we're primarily for immigration attorneys and immigration professionals. However, we are a robust legal case management system. So if you need to track cases, right? You need a smart table that looks kind of like Monday.com or that looks like Airtable, a smart table that you can configure. You can tag different things in order, so you can look at a list of all your cases and you can say, you know what, show me a list of all of the cases that are family petitions, or that are citizenship petitions, or that are a divorce petition, or a criminal defense petition of this type. You can tag all of your cases so you can easily sort through them, find them, track their status, make assignments to your staff, make assignments so that cases keep moving along. We have all the features you need, like a client portal, so clients can communicate and upload documents directly to your case. For those immigration practitioners out there, we have a lot of immigration-specific tools, forms, 150 case templates with checklists and steps to go through to complete each case. Very robust as well. Take a look at those. And e-payments, right? You need to collect payments. You want to do that electronically. It's safer. It's more secure. It's more reliable. Less problems for slippage, things like that. Find a free 15-day trial, as always, at www.prima.law. Thank you for joining us again. If you've enjoyed the content, please like and subscribe, share it with a friend. We'll be here.
All right, so here we have a representative serving in the Congress in the country of Colombia, right? Very excited for Trump. All right, and now she's telling us about her son, 28 years old, who's been unjustly arrested by the U.S. government, and now he's been detained. Now he's in inhuman conditions, and he's being jailed, and he's in chains.
I didn't even see it coming.
And as a mother, she is just imploring for mercy. She needs the state to step in. Here she's saying, he shouldn't have been arrested. He has his Social Security number. He has his next court date, which is set for 2028. And he can't go back to his country now because he's in jail. As a mother, we need some help. All right, so I have a lot to say about this clip, right? It was only like 1 minute and 4 seconds long, but there's a lot going on here. So as an immigration attorney, as someone who practices in these cases, and I see people come to my office and I get phone calls, people asking about their asylum case and what can they do? Is it something they can win? Is it something that's going to really lead to a green card? There's only a few reasons that you're going to get asylum now in the United States. All the reasons that you could get it over the last, 3 or 4 years, they've been whittled away from, right? It's no longer as easy as it used to be to claim it and get it. And it's never been something that was really even that easy to begin with. Asylum is not a fix-all or cover-all or a widely applicable benefit. People have started to see it like that because for the last 20 or 30 years, probably 30 years or more, due to the statutes and the treaties that we've signed with as the United States with other countries, if somebody comes to the border and requests asylum, there's a process in place to sort of vet them and to get that decided at some point. However, for the last 20 or 30 years, the process has not been quick. It's not been fair, and it's not been ever strewed to be in favor of the person who's requesting the benefit. No, the burden of proof is on the immigrant. Everything that they want, all the reasons they want to get asylum, they need to prove that. They need some sort of evidence, which could be as little as their own testimony if it's credible, if the judge finds it to be credible. But typically you need more than that. You need more than that to have a really strong asylum case. And it could be x-rays showing your wounds or injuries that you suffered due to government brutality or things like that. It could be copies of police reports, copies of news articles talking about what you've gone through. It could be all sorts of things, right? Sworn affidavits from people who are aware or who know the situation. But asylum is very limited. It's really limited to people who've been the victim of political persecution by the government. So it could be political, right? There's 5 grounds they call for asylum, right? So you've been persecuted because of your race, religion, nationality, political opinion, race, religion, nationality, political opinion, or because you're a member of a particular social group. It's the particular social group that's been expanded. Well, it's not really been expanded. It's been defined and redefined, sometimes expanding it and sometimes shrinking it severely. In the last few years, it's shrunk severely what qualifies as being a member of a particular social group. Okay, I've talked about this in other episodes. We don't need to go into it more now, but that's just the first step. The second step is it's the government doing it to you. And that's the reason you can't go back. And there's no other country that you passed through on your way here where you could have resettled or applied for asylum, right? So if I was, let's play prosecutor right now, right? ICE prosecutor, because this is how they'll act. This is what they're trained to do, and this is what the law says they need to do, right? First, they need to say, all right, well, why couldn't you resettle in your own country? Sure, let's assume you were persecuted. Let's assume it was the government. Why couldn't you resettle in your own country? You're from a big country. Colombia is a large country. There's a lot of modern cities there. If you're being persecuted in Barranquilla, why not move to Medellin? If you're being persecuted in Medellin, why not move to Cartagena? If you're in Cartagena, why not? Colombia is a large country. There is a police force. There is a military. They have security. You can walk around outside. No one's going to just beat the crap out of you for your political persuasion. Always, right? There is some political persecution that goes on from time to time, but it's certainly not like it was in the 80s or in the early 90s. Okay, so that's going to be one of the first things the prosecutor says is, why not internally relocate? Okay, there's a system of courts. There's a system of police. You can file reports. You can get help from the police. You can take action on your own to move to a different city and get away from the problems that you were having. Change your phone number so nobody can try and extort you again. Maybe change your online IDs. Why not do that? And one of the strongest arguments that ICE will bring to the hearing is they'll start with this line of questioning. Where did you live? Oh, I lived in Bogota because my mom is a congresswoman. Oh, your mom's a congresswoman. Where does she live? Oh, she still lives in Bogota. Where do your brothers and sisters live? Oh, they live in Bogota. Where do your aunts and uncles live? They live in Bogota. Where do all your cousins live? Oh, they live in Bogota. Where do all your nephews and nieces live? Oh, they live in Bogota. Maybe I have 1 or 2 living in the US, but they all live in Bogota. All right, so you're telling me all these people can live in your home city and they're fine, and you're the only one who's suffering government persecution. What makes you so special? What have you done? What's going on in your life that makes you so special that you're the only one in your family being persecuted and them no? How come they can live there totally fine? They're not getting arrested. They're not getting beat up by the police. They're not being recruited by gangs. They're not being, fill in the blank. All the things that, people might claim in an asylum proceeding. So I get that, right? And that's going to be one of my first questions. Well, one of my first questions is going to be, your mom's a congresswoman? Okay, I hope you're not claiming persecution based on your political opinion, because your mom's an active member of the government. So is your mom persecuting you? This asylum claim he has is probably pretty weak. Now, I don't have access to any of his affidavits or his applications, things like that. Yeah, maybe there's stuff. But from an outsider's point of view, from someone who's sat through endless asylum hearings, this one looks pretty suspicious, right? And his mom's there. The irony, of course, is that he was a major Trump supporter in the Colombian government. And now it's her son let's not forget, he's not a kid. He's 28. He's a grown adult. He's a grown man. She can put on the tears and, publish videos on YouTube or TikTok and try and seem like, oh no, this is a very sympathetic case. Your case is pretty weak. Why are you did you tell your son he should go to the United States? Did you tell him he should do it by crossing the border, probably unlawfully? At the very least, he's appearing at a border patrol station and saying, hey, I want to request political asylum. If that's your son and you're in a position of privilege and power in the Colombian government, it's not looking good for you. It's not looking good for his case either. There's no way this is a good case. And what does she say in the video? She says, oh, it's not fair. He was unjustly arrested. Yeah, your son's not the only one. Donald Trump is a wild man. Like, the violence that he's taken on the U.S. Constitution is pretty unprecedented. At least in my lifetime, it's unprecedented to have ostensibly a federal police force. I hesitate to call them police, but they're federal law enforcement agency, ICE, training guys for a few weeks and sending them out and saying, just go round up anyone who might be unlawful because we got a quota to meet. We got to do more deportations than Obama, and we're way behind. So just randomly round up anyone, and if they're not a U.S. citizen, get them out of the country. Ignore the courts, ignore court orders, ignore the federal district judges, ignore the Supreme Court judges and Court of Appeals judges, ignore it all and get them out of the country. That's what you voted for. Well, hopefully this congresswoman in Colombia didn't vote for it, but she supported it, right? I don't know how she got the MAGA hat. You'll notice she was wearing a MAGA hat. Let's take a look again. There she is. That is a MAGA hat. Now, how do you get a MAGA? How do you get a MAGA hat? How does that even happen? To get a MAGA hat, you got to buy it, unless she's making her own. And when you're buying it, you're usually buying it from the campaign. And if you're buying it from the campaign, that can be treated or considered a political contribution. And if you're not a U.S. citizen, I won't speak French here, but what in the funky bananas are you doing contributing to an American political candidate? All right, so there's another problem. She's potentially committed a federal felony against the United States. And based on what we've done with Nicolas Maduro, if you've committed a felony in our laws, what can we do now? We can come and get you. All right, now no one's going to come and get her. Nobody cares. They've got her son. That's probably good enough for what the U.S. Department of Justice has time for right now anyway, considering everybody's quitting the Department of Justice. All right, so she supported that. Right? She supported that. She supported the man who basically in his first inaugural speech, his deserted wasteland and ruined and America's awful and we're going to make it great again. Well, what did you expect was going to happen? If you were thinking, you could have seen this coming by what happened in the first administration, by reading or being aware of Project 2025. They've really upped the ante on that, Mike. I mean, Project 2025 for severity, we're talking about like here, and they've taken it to here. I mean, you heard in our last episode interviewing someone participating as a constitutional observer in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and the lengths to which this federal law enforcement agency is going to violate your Fourth Amendment rights, your First Amendment rights, your Second Amendment rights, your every amendment rights. Okay, it's an awful abuse. Let's go back to talking about her son's case, right? So she says, oh, he's got his court coming in. It's already scheduled for 2028. You know what? They can reschedule those. Just because they didn't have time at the moment, or you weren't your son wasn't a priority deportation then, now that he's detained, unless he's released on a habeas corpus petition, ICE can still say, you know what? We had it scheduled for 2028. There's a spot that just opened up. We have room for you now. So now it's going to be in 5 days. So be ready. And they can do that, and they have done that, and I'm sure they'll do it. And I don't know, if they're watching this podcast, you'll probably see it happen. So they can move that hearing up. Being scheduled for a hearing in 2028 is like zero protection. Hope you understand. Now, procedurally, it means you shouldn't be taken or detained again. It's essentially a free-for-all when it comes to how the Trump administration is running DHS right now. She said, oh, he's got his social security number. Means nothing. Having a social security number means zero. It means you can go and apply for a job if you've got your work permit too. It means you can pay taxes into the system like you're required to do, but it doesn't grant any immigration benefit. It doesn't grant any immigration status benefit. It doesn't grant you lawful presence. It doesn't grant you not having to show up if ICE wants to detain you again. Okay. So, a lot of times I'll hear that when people come into my office, they have this person's already got asylum because they have a social security number. No, it means they have a work permit and they got a social security number. It doesn't grant them anything permanent. And what else does she say? Let's go back to review the video, because sometimes when she's talking about her son here, so happy. They were so happy. He was detained in a manera. Oh, yeah, she's saying he never even had like a speeding ticket. Well, Mom, you don't always know because your son's not always going to tell you. I had a situation once where we got a phone call pretty much, late at night, and the mom's all upset and the sister's all upset. Oh, they've detained him. There's no reason. Da, da, da. Now, as an attorney, we called the police department. We said, hey, just curious what's going on. Family's a little concerned. I said, he was driving drunk. he now he's been charged with DUI. So mom, sure, you're worked up, you're upset. You don't know. It may be that he was unjustly detained because that happens, but from the information you're sharing, you don't know anything about what's really happening. It could be he was drunk driving. I'm sure that'll come out. I don't want to spread rumors, but there is that, right? Let's see. What else is she saying here? Yeah, she's saying, oh, he can't even come back to his country. Yeah, he can't come back, but I'm not sure if she's saying he can't come back to Colombia because his life's in danger. Although she seems like her life's not in danger. She's there, supporting and contributing to a political candidate in the United States, and nobody's done anything to her. She's active Congress there. So yeah, so she's asking for help from the state. Well, I got news for you. There's no help coming. You may find a private attorney. Yeah, and that would be the way to get help. It's not from the state. The state wants your kid out. They want your kid out. They want everybody similarly situated out. They want anyone who's got a pending asylum claim out. And look, if we're being honest about the asylum process, like I was explaining at the beginning, part of the problem in the U.S. immigration system is that the asylum process is been muddled up. It's inefficient. It assumes a lot based on someone passing a credible fear interview. And the threshold for passing a credible fear interview is very, very low. In a credible fear interview, that's the first level of review immigration is going to do. If you're caught, or if you present yourself at the border and say, hey, I'd like to apply for asylum. If you're lucky enough to even get an appointment at this point, because a lot of times they're saying, we're not even going to take appointments here right now. Go stand in line, go take a number and wait. We'll call you if we're ever ready, right? If you get to that point, their first level of review is going to be, all right, do you have a fear? Do you have a fear that your life is in danger? And just for the basic credible fear review purposes of a Border Patrol officer, is it believable? Okay, so example, if you can say something like, I'm afraid for my life because, the police, they're in with the cartels and they put a hit out for me. I know this because I have a friend in the police department who told me they have a hit out for me, and they came to my house and, they keep asking where I am, and they keep telling people there that they're going to come and kill me. That's a credible fear. It makes sense, right? What's a non-credible fear? Oh, the unicorns are going to come and stab me with their unicorn horns. It's not believable because it's not real. I'm sure there's other situations where it's not believable, but the threshold is very low, right? At that point, they're not asking for proof of it. At the point of the credible fear interview, they're not asking for any proof, any evidence that this is real. This could be something that's totally made up, and that's the concern that the extreme right has expressed in the immigration debate, right? When they say, oh, they're just letting everybody in. Well, it's not just letting everybody in, but they are giving them this low-level credible fear interview, which is very easy to pass. And if you do pass it, well, then you're let in temporarily until you can have your appointment in the immigration court. But like this woman was saying, he had his court hearing scheduled for 2028. Now, as we speak, it's 2026. Probably when it was scheduled, it was 2025. It's taking a long time. And what the Trump administration did is they fired a good part of the immigration judges and want to replace them with military JAG officers, right? So military officers who have a few weeks of training, and you're going to put them in as immigration judges. Now, immigration law is highly complex. There's a reason you need immigration attorneys right now, because the system is complex, and it's complex now because it's been modified over the last 20 and 30 years. There's court decisions that interpret different statutes. Some statutes have been found unconstitutional as applied retroactively, but not proactively. Some statutes have been unconstitutional, period. Some have been limited in their scope. Some apply in the different federal circuits. So the Sixth Circuit might have one case that applies where it doesn't apply or provide the same protection in the Ninth Circuit, or the 87654-321 First Circuit, or the DC Circuit. So it is complex. And to expect judges to get it after a few weeks of training is ridiculous when it takes years to really become versed in how these different statutes interact, how they apply. And there are important subjects like bond, right? Who qualifies for a bond, which has now been thrown into question again in the Fifth Circuit, even though all the other district courts and circuits have said, no, you can't just mandatorily detain everyone. There's two sections of law, one for people who just entered and one for people who've been here. You got to determine and apply it differently. So they've caused a bit of chaos on their own. So I wanted to review that because it's pretty ridiculous that we would have a foreign congressional leader voicing her support, and probably financial support, for Donald Trump and then instantly regretting it when it touches her, when it touches someone who she loves in her family. In this case, when it touches her adult son, who there should be no reason he's crossing the border in order to try and request asylum. Some of the comments to this video, you could see people were like, his mom is a congresswoman. Why didn't he just request a tourist visa? Why didn't he go get a student visa? He's 28. He's in the age where he could get a student visa and study at a university in the US. Why not apply for some other work visa? Why not apply for some other type of visa and, quote, do it the right way? Okay, now barring some far unseen circumstances here, he doesn't have an asylum case. Just from looking at it from here, he doesn't seem like he fits the definition of someone who can get asylum. So there you have it. There's someone who just could not have seen it coming. Now on this channel, we don't just talk about immigration related stuff, but legal and important Supreme Court cases and things like that. So the next one we're going to discuss today is a case called Learning Resources Incorporated versus Trump. And this is where we have, the named plaintiff. There's a number of plaintiffs. Some of the states were involved. There were a number of companies that were involved, but the named plaintiff, the person whose company name is in the title of the lawsuit, usually the first one who wants to file, Learning Resources Incorporated. Little bit of background on them. Who are they and why are they suing President Trump regarding tariffs? There's actually two related family-owned small businesses based in Vernon Hills, Illinois. They specialize in designing and distributing educational toys and materials for children. There's one that's a coding robot and something called Canoodle. I'm just looking at some of the details here. Well, Rick Woldenberg is the CEO of Learning Resources, and he became a vocal critic of these tariffs when they came out, saying that they pose an existential threat to his family business. Okay, now, why is it so important for this educational supplies company? Well, because for 40 years, they've been manufacturing in China. And because of import-related costs, they went from $2.3 million in costs in 2024 to over $100 million in costs in 2025. That's unsustainable no matter what business you're in. If your costs jump 80% or more, you go from $2.3 million to $100 million, that's too much, right? There's no way to maintain a profit margin with something like that. So, of course, what did he do? He sued. Sued first in district court. It was removed to the Board of Trade, where the court said it belonged. And so they sued. Okay, now there's another another company involved. They filed a parallel case in the Court of International Trade, which was consolidated with this one, with Learning Resources. And it's a small wine importer that specializes in artisanal and family estate wines. Okay, so again, he couldn't absorb that in his, because it was a 10% duty or something that was imposed. He said it's not something he was able to even handle. So they did not have a 10% profit margin. He said it was going to be too difficult. And then a bunch of other businesses joined, right? Now, I can tell you that for some of our businesses, we've actually held off on ordering more promotional items or swag or free stuff, stuff that we give away for free, but that we buy from China because the price of manufacturing is just ridiculously more affordable than you could do even stateside. And even some of it you can't do here. They don't have the capacity for it. So, even we've held off. A lot of companies have done that. And just in talking with other business people and manufacturers here in the US, it's been impossible for them to even do their jobs or provide price quotes to customers because there's so much uncertainty on what the price is going to be, because we've come to rely so much on aluminum from overseas or on these other products or steel from overseas, where if from one day to the next, if you'll remember, it was just a few months ago where the president was out there saying, oh, you're going to say that to me? We're going to get a 25% tariff. 3 hours later, now it's a 50% tariff. The next day, it's a 250% tariff. There's no way you can operate a business with that sort of volatility, right? It's another good reason that Bitcoin is such a dumb thing to invest in, because it goes up and down unpredictably over time based on who knows what. Sorcery, for all I care. And that's how the president was running the country. Sorcery, right? Essentially saying at his whim, if you didn't kiss his royal ring enough, he was going to raise tariffs on you, which is why you saw countries like Vietnam saying, oh, we love you. We think you're the best. He's like, we'll do business with you, right? So that's the reason they brought the suit. Now, essentially, what the debate in the suit is does the president have constitutional authority to impose tariffs like this? And the way that the president was imposing tariffs was based on an economic emergency. IEEPA is the statute, the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, right? And it says that he can regulate the import and export of items due to economic emergency. It doesn't say he can impose tariffs. There are other statutes that say for certain reasons he can impose tariffs up to 15%, which he's now done since he lost in court yesterday. He said, well, then everything's getting of 10%. And 2 hours later, it was now everything's 15%. Right? So again, using sorcery, wizardry, and his divining cup to tell us what the right level of tariffs should be. There's a word for this in law. It's called arbitrary and capricious. It's the way dictators act. And it's the reason we have a Congress and statutes to prevent that sort of dictatorial abuse of power. And that's what the court said. Essentially, the court said, you don't have authority. There's nothing we can point to in the Constitution or in a statute where Congress delegated some authority to you for this. It doesn't exist. It's not there. You can't do it. What you did was illegal. And the court uses what they call the major questions doctrine. And the major questions doctrine says whenever there's one of these big questions like that, if you're assuming a power that belongs to another branch of government or maybe doesn't belong to you at all, the rule is you have to point to something specific that gives you that authority. If you can't find it, you can't use it. You don't have that authority anymore. Now, just a quick constitutional law lesson. Let's remember the whole reason the United States Constitution is and has been special is it comes down to the rights, not that it grants, right? You're not granted any rights under the Constitution. Your God-given rights are preserved from government interference. So if we have someone in government who's saying, oh, I have the right to do this, the government says I can do anything. No, the Constitution, the government does not. The Constitution, because that's what he's saying now. Trump is out there saying, oh, I can do anything. I can destroy nations. I can do this. I mean, it's sounding pretty, he sounds like a bad guy from the book of Revelations. He's like, I can do anything. I can destroy nations. That's not a title reserved to the President of the United States. But back on topic, the Constitution isn't granting rights. It says the right to free speech shall not be infringed. The right to the exercise of religion shall not be infringed. So it assumes from a starting point that we have these innate, inalienable rights that you can't separate the individual from. The Constitution recognizes that, and in a way, you could say, in that way, it grants it. Philosophically, legally speaking, religiously speaking, the Constitution doesn't grant us rights. It protects the government from abusing the rights that we as a free people have. And that is a huge distinction. And it's obvious that the president doesn't understand that. And anyway, so when we go back to look at the major questions doctrine, the court is saying, okay, because the Constitution deals with enumerated powers, powers that it grants for people to get involved with or grants for the government to get involved with while preserving the others to the people, what is it in the Constitution that allows you the authority to establish these tariffs on a whim or on an emergency that you declare yourself and is not reviewed by anyone else, which again is just dictatorial power. It just means you get a dictator who can do what he wants. If he can declare something and nobody is able to review it, then he's a free-for-all, right? And that's what they've been operating under since the beginning of the Trump administration. So the court asked the question. And I remember, because I listened to the oral arguments on this, because it's a major constitutional power, the power to tax. When you look in the Constitution, as pointed out by John Roberts here, Chief Justice John Roberts emphasized that in Article 1, Section 8 of the U.S. Constitution, that gives the taxing power, including tariffs. Specifically, it gives that power to Congress. The framers specifically designed the U.S. government so that raising taxes, raising funds, creating tariffs was a power that did not fit in the executive branch. That's called having a king. That's called having a dictator. If you have a king who can say, tax the colonies, I need another war. We need to pay for the French and Indian War. Tax the colonies. That's what they were trying to avoid, is the ability of an executive to unilaterally impose taxes. The Stamp Act, the paper tax, the sugar tax, the tea tax, name the taxes. The founders of the Constitution, the founders of the United States hated an executive with the power to tax because they felt the brunt of it, just like the plaintiffs here did, just like we did. We would have loved to order some really cool swag to give away from China. We would have loved to order some newer t-shirts. We would have loved to do that stuff. But we said, you know what? The cost-benefit analysis, it's unpredictable. I don't know if I'm going to spend $1,000 on t-shirts or if I'm going to spend, well, what's 250% of $1,000? $2,500 on t-shirts. That makes a difference to small business or even a big business. And to all these companies, and I spoke to one specifically, they build the cooling systems, the refrigeration systems for the AI data centers that we want to build so we can build, a better technological base in the United States. They said we didn't know how to quote prices. We couldn't, there were some quotes we lost, we couldn't do because as a company, we couldn't project the costs. It would be more cost effective for us to not do anything and eat into our savings than it would be to take a leap of faith and quote a price that could end up make us lose even more money. That's the cost the American economy took. So it's not just ordering swag. It's like these big industrial technological things that we need to have happen. Apple panicked, right? If you'll remember, Apple came on their knees, kissing the rear end of Donald Jeffrey Epstein Trump, giving him a gold little placard saying, oh, by the way, this is pure gold, by the way, because they needed a special exemption so that iPhones wouldn't cost $5,000 because they built their whole technological base there on pressure from the US government to do it, right? That's how the system was set up for them. So that's what the court asked. They said, this is the major question, point to something. And in the oral arguments, over and over, you could hear the majority and the people who came out in the majority in this opinion asking that question. And the big question they came to then, well, isn't raising a tariff like that, isn't it a tax? Because if it's a tax, it's clearly under Article 1, Section 8. That power belongs to the Congress. It doesn't belong to the executive. The American system is built that way to avoid federal executive that can just raise taxes on their own, that can set new taxes into place. And the fact of the matter is a tariff is a tax. And I know there's people who say, well, the companies just pass it along. Not always. No, sometimes we can't do anything because of the tax. Sometimes we can't take action. Sometimes we can't absorb that cost because we already quoted a price to a client and we're under contract to deliver it at that price. But now, on a whim, the president, the dictator in chief, decided he needed to do something else. Declared his own emergency, made up. There was no actual emergency. It was unreviewable. And then he said, and if you look at it, the way that they were imposed is in the context of trade negotiations. So we're going to renegotiate this trade deal. Okay, fine. And now there's an emergency. So now I have even more power to raise tariffs or lower tariffs or do whatever I need to do with tariffs. It was never a question of, whoa, there's been a major shift in the steel industry. All our American steel mills are going to go out of business unless we do this. That wasn't the situation. Don't be fooled. I don't remember if Obama ever did something like that. I remember specifically George W. Bush did. But there was something where the steel industry needed to retool in order to stay competitive. And we need a domestic steel industry. This is one of those things you got to have. So these all happened in the context of somebody not respecting Donald Trump enough, him perceiving an insult, him feeling slighted, him getting a book about golf instead of a gold trophy when people were coming to the White House. And then him with his whole narrative of we're being screwed as a nation, we're being screwed. And so he declares an emergency that doesn't exist and claims these powers for himself, and the court said no. Right? The court argued that Congress would not hide the massive power to tax an entire national economy with the vague word regulate, because in the Emergency Powers Act, it says he can regulate trade. The court said no, regulate in this sense isn't tax. They could have said tax, they could have said tariff. They didn't in the statute. And it exists in all these other statutes, the power to tariff if this happens or that happens, but they didn't put it here. And the court also noted that in the 50-year history of the IEEPA, no president ever did use it to impose tariff. Now, if there was a real emergency, what would it let the president do? It would say we can stop the importation of all, fill in the blank, t-shirts. We can stop the importation of all t-shirts. The American t-shirt industry is suffering. We're going to stop the import of all aluminum, steel, minerals, grain, beef, whatever. We could stop the importation of it 100% if it was a real emergency. That could happen. It just goes to show that that wasn't what happened. So that's where the big debate in the case came down to. The vote breakdown, the majority. Roberts, Gorsuch, Barrett. Concurring in the majority was Kagan, Sotomayor, and Jackson. And oddly enough, dissenting, you had Thomas, Justice Thomas, the one who was on the payroll of billionaires who's getting free RVs so he can tour the country, stay comfortable, and not want to quit being a Supreme Court justice. Kavanaugh, the recently appointed under Trump, and Alito. Now let's talk a little bit about what their point of view was, because I think it's important. Now in the dissent, Justice Kavanaugh, Justice Thomas, and Alito, what they were saying is they say, well, that word regulate is actually inclusive of tariffs. Because if the president under that statute is allowed to stop the importation completely, he should be able to do something less aggressive under it as well, including the imposition of tariffs, because it's less severe. So it should be a lesser included power under the statute, and by using that word regulate. There's a problem though. And they did quote to this case from 1975 where Richard Nixon used presidential authority to impose a 10% tariff, 10% surcharge. And this was in something called the Yoshida case, United States versus Yoshida International. Congress, though, wrote this statute, the IEEPA, 2 years later in 1977. So this was still fresh in Congress's mind. So what you have is a president exercising authority to put a 10% surcharge on imports. Congress can say, we're going to pass a statute. We want it to be clear that you can't do that. That's what it looks like they did. Congress was aware that this was something the presidency wanted to do, that the executive was trying to flex its muscle to be able to do. And so when they wrote the statute, they did not include the word surcharge or tariffs with the list of authorities or powers that the president would have in this sort of economic emergency. So that's important. Justice Thomas tends to believe that in regulating domestic powers, yeah, it should be harder for Congress to do, but it should be less difficult for them to do it for international powers. But the crux of the matter is, and like the majority pointed out, we're dealing with the power to tax. When a tariff is instituted, and this is of course what we learned, I ordered one time some letter openers imported from China, custom printed with something on it. Now, because they had a sharp blade on it, there was a couple extra papers we had to sign when it went to be inspected by customs, right? If you order knives from another country, like, it's sharp, it's in the same category, who are you? What do you need these for? Okay, and there's an extra tariff that you have to pay based on the category of the item that you're importing. Well, let me tell you who didn't pay the tariff. Customers of mine did not pay the tariff, right? We purchased them at a particular price point, knowing we could give them away for free, but there's no way to pass on that cost business or absorb it anywhere else. It's something where when the government said, hey, you need to pay it, they said, you need to pay it James Betzold, not you need to have your clients send a check and pay it, or you need to call your Chinese factory and tell them that they got to pay it. What they said is, you, James Betzold, pay it, or we're denying it and we'll destroy it. We're not even going to ship it back. We'll just destroy it for you. So it's a tax that's paid by American citizens, not anybody else. And so when we look at this case and we say, oh, president's trying to use emergency powers to bypass something Congress is supposed to do, or something that a statute established by Congress is supposed to do, a president's executive power is not unlimited. It's not infinite. In fact, if we remember, like I said earlier, under the promise of the U.S. Constitution, the president has explicit enumerated powers designed to limit what he can do so that the powers and freedoms and liberties of individuals, of persons in the United States are protected. It's not a grant of power to the executive. It's not even a grant of power to the Congress. It's a limitation on their executive or legislative powers. That's the purpose of having the Constitution, which once again, and I think it's a fun exercise, when you see something, an action that the executive branch is taking, and it doesn't have to be just under the Trump administration. We can look back at the Biden administration and find examples. We can look back on the Obama administration and find examples. We can look back on the Bush, Reagan, Nixon, Carter, whoever administration, even the shortly lived Gerald Ford administration, and we can find examples where the executive trying to overreach and they're trying to use powers that they don't have. I know one of the popular lines and arguments in court or in a presidential administration, in any government, they're sitting around trying to figure out, well, how can we do this? For example, let's take Minneapolis. Okay, they send in ICE agents to round up everybody who's around. Anyone who looks brown, you look brown, black, talk with an accent, You don't look white American. They go send them to round them up, arrest first, and ask questions later. Okay? A clear violation of the Constitution. But when they're asking and when they're considering this, I guarantee you the conversation is, well, Mr. President, I don't want to be the one to tell you no, but I really don't think we have the authority to do that. And somebody else will pipe up and say, well, wait a minute. Where does it say that we can't do it? And in the American legal system, in the framing of the government, that is not a question that should even ever come up. Where does it say we can't? Well, if it doesn't say we can't, then we can't. Because the way it's designed is the powers are reserved to the people in the states. Congress is limited to what they can do by these things we're telling you here. They're limited to what they can do. Executive is limited to what they can do by these things here. So it is fun to look whenever we see a new policy or a new procedure come out from the administration to sort of gauge it. Let's gauge the constitutionality of it by this major question doctrine. Like, okay, well, let's point to the statute that says they can do it. And then with that in mind, where does the Constitution give Congress the statutory authority to make this statute? It's a fun exercise. So that's the second topic I wanted to go over was this case. It does have lessons for, I think, us and hopefully the Trump administration when it comes to some immigration related topics. For example, wanting to redefine birthright citizenship. The Constitution spells it out. Who is a citizen? You're born here, you're a citizen. Unless you're born to someone who the United States doesn't have jurisdiction over, like an ambassador or a consular employee of a foreign nation. Okay? Pretty specific. Now, very similar to this case, the executive branch is trying to flex their muscle via executive orders, via policy directives and things like that to change that definition. I hope we see the same result. If we're going by the lesson learned here, it should be the same result, where the Supreme Court should say at some point, actually, that's not a power that's given to the president to define who is a citizen. It's defined by statute, by Constitution already. When the president says, oh, we need a $100,000 fee for this, or we want to stop these visas, or we want to stop processing visas from these countries because now there's an emergency. Well, let's take a look at the emergency. Is it a real emergency? Does the statute actually give you the authority in unreviewable discretion to make that decision? So I think there's a lot of good lessons and there's a lot of hope. What's the name of this court case again? There's so many. Learning Resources Incorporated versus Trump, 2026. And bring us. All right, let's go to our next topic. Okay, now this last topic we're going to talk about today is breaking news, and maybe we should have led with this, although I just saw it come across the news wires here. So there's news when it comes to work permits for asylum seekers. Now look, this kind of goes back to the first video we saw, right? With the Colombian congresswoman mom who's crying about her son. Look, he had his work permit, he had his social security card. Means nothing. And the US government knows, and the Trump administration knows, and all immigration attorneys know this, and all migrants apparently are learning this now. Well, they've known it. One of the reasons you want to come to the US and request asylum, even if you know you may not win your case, is that hope that you'll get a work permit in the meantime. And that meantime can be a few years, right? Like she was saying, he had his court in 2028 scheduled. Well, that's at least probably it was 3 years or more. He's going to be able to work in the US, make some money, save it up. If he gets a removal order, okay, he flies home. It's sort of a way of circumventing the legitimate employment visa process. So the administration knows that, and now they're going after it in a major way. First time around, right under the first Trump administration, we saw them change the eligibility period, try to change the eligibility period, saying, when you file an asylum application, instead of waiting 6 months, you now have to wait a year before you can ask for a work permit. Current law, the way the law has always been, is 180 days, right? If it's taking the government more than 180 days to decide your case, looks like you're going to be here a while, you may as well have a work permit so you can participate in society and not be poor, miserable, and sick, right? That's the idea of asylum applicants getting work permits. Of course, like I said, systemically, the asylum process is awful. It's inefficient, and you're guaranteed most of the time to have to wait more than 6 months or a year to have your case even heard, let alone decided. The Trump administration, instead of saying, well, we're going to speed that up, instead of doing that, what they're saying is, let's make it harder for you to even qualify for a work permit. So let's go over, there's a new proposed rule. So it's in the proposal stage, but a lot of these proposed rules have a way of becoming official regulations before long, okay, after it goes through the process. So let's review it. It's actually scheduled to be published tomorrow. It's actually out today. Today's Sunday, tomorrow's Monday. And here's the big differences that are happening. It's essentially going to be a 173-year pause in getting a work permit. And it could be that long because the proposal is that whenever the government has too many applications, and it's not even too many applications, whenever it's taking the government too long to approve this amount of applications, they're just going to put a whole 100% pause on accepting new applications. This is a scam. This is a scam that looks like it was designed directly by the president because it's the type of scams he would engage in, okay? Because it's easy to game that system. If you say, well, if we've ever got, okay, whenever the average processing time for asylum cases exceeds 180 days, no work permit. Okay, so before it was designed that 180 days, like if you have to wait that long, here's a little mercy, go fit into society, go work and whatever, so we can finish it. Now what they're saying, if it's taking us more than 180 days to resolve an asylum case, nobody can apply for any work permit. Actually just on its face, that would bar you from ever getting a work permit because the current wait period is 180 days. And so if it ever is taking longer than 180 days, you don't get a work permit. That's like sort of you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. Like if you have to wait, you don't get one. If you don't need to wait, you don't get one. If they hear your case on time, you don't get one. Anyways, because there's so many pending asylum cases right now, the current estimates, which the own rules, internal analysis, and logic admit, it could already take anywhere between 14 and 170 years to get the backlog down enough to unpause work permit. So if you're an asylum seeker, you've got a pending asylum claim, or you think you're going to come to the US, if this law passes, you just give up on getting a work permit. Not even a law passes. It's just a rule that the federal agency wants to implement. It goes through a process and it'll become law. Essentially, that's how it happens. Usually these things are rubber stamped and approved. So that's the problem, is it could put a 173-year pause on asylum seekers getting work permits. But not just that, it gets better. It institutes a 365-day waiting period. So instead of waiting 180 days before you can apply for asylum, you got to wait a year, which means you got to survive in the United States without a work permit, without a social security number, without a driver's license, without a library card, probably without health insurance. You got to survive a year before you can even ask for a work permit, and then it's going to take time for them to process it. And if the other part of the law, or the part of the rule passes, well, there's so many cases pending now, you just forget about it. Don't give up now. It gets better. There's a 48-hour snitch rule that's part of the process now too as well. What they're saying is, to be eligible, even if you pass those hurdles, to be eligible for a work permit, you need to prove that within 48 hours of being in the United States, you notified an official of your fear of persecution. And if you can't prove that, you don't get a work permit, period. Okay? So if the client or the individual or the person or you, if you're someone crossing the border with Mexico, you cross the border, you're wandering in the desert, lost for a couple days, and only on day 3, somebody finds you, or you're rescued, or you stumble upon a border patrol station. And even if the first thing you say is, I'm in fear of persecution in my life, too late. You don't get any work permit at all. Now, beyond that, it gets even better. It's even better, or worse, I guess we could say. If you met the criteria, the government has to give you a work permit. That's how it is now, right? If you can prove you meet all the requirements, they shall give you a work permit. They have to do it. It's not optional. Under the proposed rule, they get complete discretion to give it to you or not. Now, anyone who might still be listening, and you're more to the right or the conservative side of things, the more the Republican side, you'll remember there is and has been a major debate in the United States about shall issue, not in the context of work permits, but in the context of a concealed carry permit, a permit to carry a concealed weapon. Many states had a law that said they may issue. Some states had a shall issue, like they must issue it if you meet the requirements. And so in that context, boy, wasn't it great when states went from being may issue to a shall issue. It became more just. It became more fair and equally applying the law. We must admit that. So let's be consistent in immigration as well. So there's a lot going on with work permits. There's a lot going on with immigration. That's all I wanted to cover right now. But stay tuned. We've always got new episodes coming out. We hope this has been enjoyable. I hope you learned something. And you know what? It's great to see that there's some positive news coming from the United States Supreme Court, even by the justices appointed by Donald Trump. And like I have to tell people sometimes when they start getting down, like, man, the court's not on our side. The court's just a bunch of biased conservatives. The court's going to always rule like that. They're always going to rule in Trump's favor. No, we're not there yet. The country has not fallen into such ruin, disrepair, or so much totalitarianism that we've lost the Supreme Court being able to judge fairly. It's 3 liberal justices and 3 very conservative justices. That tells us something. That tells us something important. It tells us something real about the Supreme Court is working. And the fact that the president comes out and says, our court's been infiltrated by enemies, the court's been infiltrated by blah, 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 all that nasty stuff. It's just bluster on his part. It's not real. You had people from across the political spectrum agreeing that the president had overstepped his executive authority on this. And that's great. It's great for America and it's great for us. Again, this is Attorney Betzel. This is the Prima Law Podcast.
I supported the strong man, his face is orange. I bought him NAGA hat, this donation was foreign. My boy crossed the border and asked for asylum. He got the 589 and the notary filed him. Now the Iceman cometh and put him in chains. Brought him to jail and they locked him away. How did it end up like this? It's a total mystery, a swing and a miss. Yeah, I'm standing in the wreckage of a life beat coming. And I swear to you, I never even saw it coming. Totally blindsided, out of left field, man. Who could have predicted the tiger would bite? Wait, what was that? I never even saw it coming. I bought a tiger from a guy in the van. He said he's friendly, he's a big fan of man. I kept him in the kitchen by the tuna and the steak. I didn't use a leash, that was my first mistake. Well, he looked at my leg like a giant drumstick. I tried to pet his head, but he was way too quick. Now I'm sitting in the ER with the bandage on my face, wondering how chaos took over the place. And I say, whoa, how did it end up like this? It's a total mystery, a swing and a miss. Yeah, I'm standing in the wreckage of a life beat coming. And I swear to you, I never even saw it coming. No, I never even saw it coming. I saw a web paint sign on a park bench seat. I thought that's a challenge that I gotta meet. I sat right down in my brand new white suit, feeling real dapper, feeling real cute. Then I tried to stand up, but I was stuck to the wood. I ripped out the seat like I knew that I would. Now I'm walking down the street with my rear in the air. How did this happen? It's totally unclear. And I say, whoa, how did it end up like this? It's a total mystery, a swing and a miss. Yeah, I'm standing in the wreckage of a life beat coming. And I swear to you, I never even saw it coming. The stove was glowing bright and red. Don't touch that thing, my mama said. But I needed to know if it was actually hot. Turns out it really was a lie. Supported the strong man, his face is orange. I bought him NAGA hat, this donation was foreign. My boy crossed the border and asked for asylum. He got the 589 and the notary filed him. Now the Iceman cometh and put him in chains. Brought him to jail and they locked him away. How did it end up like this? It's a total mystery, a swing and a miss. Yeah, I'm standing in the wreckage of a life beat coming. And I swear to you, I never even saw it coming. Totally blindsided, out of left field, man. Who could have predicted the tiger would bite? Wait, what was that? I never even saw it coming.